On Tuesday, our favorite creepy Uncle Joe Biden gave his State of the Union address, or I like to refer to him as Ku Klux Joe. And I think I saw a balloon fly over. That and much, much more on the Politically Tolerant. My name is Zachary Groper.
I'm Cooper Brown.
I think that might have been the worst speech ever given by a president. And I think one of them got shot once. Roosevelt, but
I mean, that was, I mean, when I watched the State of the Union address, it's so boring and it's so monotonous. They kind of feel the same always. And then I've been thinking about kind of what he's been saying lately. And this is like me with movies. My best impressions are when I first watch it, and the longer it takes, the more I just hate the thing. And there's just Joe Biden, so many lies, so many inconsistent talking points. It was kind of hysterical. Just the amount of just ridiculous nature that is going on. And then subsequently, the utter fandom the media has for him now, that saying that, oh, he did this most amazing job, it was one of the greatest speeches Biden has ever given in his like 75 years of being in political life. I'm just like, that was a disaster.
I think one of them referred to him as like a Roosevelt, as like Franklin Roosevelt giving his speech to us, the State of the Union. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Like he shows what the Democrat Party is all about, how we have to go back to roots. Ridiculous.
Oh, he certainly shows what the Democrats are about, for sure.
But they're going to the other direction. But yeah, I mean, I think like my first impression of it is like there was no intention to build like a partisan relationship with the Republican Party. It was all divisiveness, and they were going in the complete other direction and blaming Republicans for certain things. We were talking. I mean, I know you were talking about entitlement programs and gun reform. I mean, just subtle things that we could build continuity on. It was just taken and completely gone the other direction. What are your thoughts on that, group?
I mean, there's an entire list that we created of just all of the lies and just all the fact checks that we can do just throughout his speech. Like talking about his record job employment. That was kind of the first main section of what he talked about, was kind of like, these are all the amazing things that I was able to do so far in the last 2 years, where he basically just outright lied, said that there's like record job report numbers, and that which is not necessarily true. Most of that was all just rebounding effect from COVID, which was the largest artificial coma in toast like that has ever been seen in the entire world.
Yeah. I mean,
talking. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, yeah, you said he created a total of 12 million jobs, and mainly those jobs, like Cooper said, reinforced in COVID. Not only that, a lot of them were temporary expulsions from the job. So he didn't create any jobs. They're just people on leave because of COVID who were able to resume their job back. This is complete wrong. And there's something about him saying about insulin prices, right, Cooper, with Donald Trump?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you want to get into the insulin prices really fast, though, that if you look at the jobs report from where we are now, it's basically even with what we were in 2020 pre-COVID. So, but we're now 3 years removed. So we basically lost 3 years worth of job growth and economic growth, and we're back to where we were before the pandemic. So we should have developed way more by then. He talked about one of the things he talked about was the insulin that he proposed legislation to the costs of insulin, which that was something Donald Trump did in his administration. Biden then repealed it, and I was trying to claim credit for that now. One of the hilarious ones of the night was when he totally contradicted himself about oil and oil prices, where he said that, listen, companies don't need to worry about me attacking them and me going after oil. It's going to be a long time before we need oil. It's going to need like 10 years.
Yeah.
And then all the Republicans in the audience just bursted out laughing, because anyone that knows anything knows that it takes a lot longer than 10 years to build these refineries, to start drilling oil and to get them shipped and get them ready. And so he literally just made their case for them of why his actions directly are messing with the cost of oil and gas.
He was like, okay, he said, I'm a capitalist. I'm all for the oil companies. Even though he's given the few amount of permits. I mean, this is statistically evidence since World War II to an oil company. Not only that, his climate change initiatives, his programs he wants to put in, has not allowed for any oil production within the United States, and has led to a high production cost and high oil prices. So whatever he's saying about what's going on is actually not taking place, and it's the complete opposite of what he's trying to say.
Yeah. Next point we want to talk about is where he was talking about, this is just another talking point leftists bring up all the time, is that the wealthy aren't paying their fair share. This has been debunked a lot, where we know that the top 1% of all people that pay, or the highest percentage of taxpayers, the 1%, pay all net tax for the entirety of the country. Once after subsidies and you know, tax bails and stuff like that, it's 100% basically of the revenue comes from the 1%. Another outright lie. One of my favorite moments actually was when Joe Biden then pointed to the stand, and as a common trope now in all State of the Union addresses, thank you, Ronald Reagan, for that. And he pointed out to an individual who had a story of him stopping a crime with a firearm, or so he was getting held up by a firearm, and he wrestled the individual to the ground, saying that this individual had committed, had shot, I think 11 to 12 people prior to going and attacking this individual. But they saying they were fighting over a handgun. And then immediately after saying they were fighting over a handgun, he then says, we need to ban all assault weapons, which is probably one of the most misconstrued terms in all of American, like the entire country, is the term assault weapon. And if for people that don't know, assault weapons are basically like nobody owns them. Statistically, 0% of the country owns them, because by definition, they are fully automatic capability. And that's not what rifles, 99.9999999% of rifles are. They haven't even been able to be produced for civilian use since the 60s. So it's just a ridiculous kind of talking point that Democrats use, saying attack assault weapons. What he really wanted to say was, I want to ban all semi-automatics, which is like 90% of all guns. I mean, good luck with that one. But
yeah, also, like, going off of what you said, it was, we only didn't do that for like the killings in Monterey, California. But he also pointed out to Tyree Nichols' family, and used that. I mean, just 2 weeks ago, right? The killings were just 2 weeks ago. He pointed out to them, he just lost his son, and used as a platform to talk about an emotional appeal, no statistical evidence, talking about how, you know, as a Black person, if you're confronted by the police, you have to do certain things, and he never had to give that talk to his family, even though, as we talked about last episode, all the police officers were Black. I mean, it's just complete ignorance of the fact. It's just Democratic talking points, one after another. They have to confirm within the analysis, even though the facts and the truth beg to differ within the matter. But I mean,
I know you don't have your license. You still ride around on a moped or something. But and all of us that do drive, we've all had that talk that like how you're supposed to conduct yourself when you're pulled over by a police officer. Like, this is not a thing that's only that only occurs in the Black community. Everyone gets this talk, and for Joe Biden to go up there and say, I never had to give my children the talk about you put two hands on the steering wheel, you don't reach for your glove compartment, like all very basic things.
Well, Cooper, the idea was, like, he said it was about based on race, though. It wasn't the talk itself was based on race, which is a fallacy, though.
Right.
So, right.
All right. And then, so in that regard, when he was talking about that case, again, implying that all police officers are racist. No, that's not true. It's just an outright lie. Another hilarious one where he basically blamed all Republicans for the attack on Nancy Pelosi.
Oh, yeah.
Where blaming it on January 6th, even though we now know that this individual is not only an illegal alien from Canada, but was like a crazed hippie lunatic, leftist dude. Clearly alt-right.
Right, clearly. I mean, yeah. I mean, he called companies fascists. So, I mean, that's keep a talking point. But yeah, I mean, just going off of what we were talking about, because I thought this may be very interesting for the public if they don't know the statistics on the measures of, of police and the amount of killings per people. Let's just go about by the past maybe 3 years, okay? 389 police officers died from police officers. Oh, white people, 389 white people died from police officers, and the equivalent of 225 from black. It was even fewer in 2021, 302 white people and only 177 black people. In 2020, 459, during the George Floyd riots, 459 white people compared to 243. So there's this complete ignorance of facts and this idea that black people overwhelmingly are killed by police officers. And what we see in the narrative in the media, going off of that, given the talk about being racist, given the talk of that, it seems like maybe police officers are more inclined to, say, hey, maybe I should engage in a situation. But I mean,
and even those statistics just read off don't necessarily take into account, because those are of all crimes. So that's including people that are shooting at the police officers, trying to reach for their gun, that are beating them with an object, that's trying to run them over with their car. So that's including the one. So a lot of those are justifiable shootings.
Right. But you would agree, though, that still overwhelmingly white people, though.
Well, clearly, white people are the majority of the country, so it makes sense that they are the majority of those acts. But the disproportionate nature is what they would argue, right? But if you look at the number of unarmed black people, because those statistics are out there too, it's way smaller than even that. So, it's like pandering to the highest level.
Going off, I think we should talk more about his fallacies. See, this was not more of a lie, but a misuse of the truth, which is essentially a lie. But he said that under Joe Biden's administration, there was no autocracies that came to power, which is like, okay, that's just one leader taking in effect the power. But you know what did take place? The Taliban took control of Afghanistan, bring his regime, they have oppressive measures. Not only that now they're having a lot of deals with China. Only that, obviously, the Russian invasion of Ukraine is another thing that came to that. And you think that would happen to Trump? I mean,
no.
Trump all you want. He's a lunatic. That's why no one did anything. But still, you could call him whatever you want. But still, that wouldn't happen with Trump's administration. So what he's saying is necessarily right, kind of, but not completely, because worse things took place, as we see in Afghanistan. A complete radical regime took place, and with Ukraine. So that's one thing I wanted to point out as well.
It's his in foreign policy in particular, Joe Biden has been a massive failure. It was like watching an old man yell at you from like the retirement home, or like from across the street of like the subway or something like that, where he's just like spouting nonsense. He spent more time talking about what was it, like price ceiling, airline traffic fees, and fees for like luggage than he did about China his entire speech.
Yeah, what was that argument he was trying to make on that? He was trying to say we have to give the fair share to the people about, couldn't airlines do whatever they want in terms of ticketing and pricing?
It's hilarious that he's like trying to gain the base of the rich people that can travel everywhere, that can stay in resorts, apparently, I guess, like that he's saying, even though they're supposed to be the party of the poor and the working class. Haven't been that for many decades, it seems like.
Oh, absolutely. Oh yeah, forgot about one thing he also did. He talked about we need to give teachers more money. This has been a talking point forever, but we obviously talked about the situation of education system going completely propagandized. But there's not only that, as you see teacher unions having an increasing amount of power with lobbyist groups, and who are actually shown to have the most money and influence and sway in terms of teachers, So we see, at least I think in California in recent years, I think they got a cumulative amount of 50 million in terms of teacher union. I mean, fact check on me on that. But we see them; they can make changes in their ones, but they choose not to. They choose to support teachers who have been more tenured in these environments, choose them over new teachers who actually might maybe have a positive influence in terms of teaching. They generally not use to favor them, but people who have been teachers for a while and actually have a huge sums and huge salaries, which is completely untrue to say that, oh yeah, we need to do more for teachers. We should try to get rid of teacher unions. That's what we should actually try to do. But we don't see that happening.
Yeah, at a time when America's literacy rate is at an all-time low, we need to give the teachers a raise because they deserve it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. Great.
We teach them more about drag queens and we teach them about mathematics. So yeah, let's give teachers raises.
Gosh. Yeah, so in total, to sum up basically the State of the Union, if you didn't have to sit through it, good for you. You saved yourself some brain cells. It was just lies and just like total gaslighting from Joe Biden. And then the media then subsequently following saying that everything he said, like it was one of the greatest speeches I've ever heard of all time. For the 250 years Joe Biden has been in office, it's been his greatest speech. Even though he was stumbling his way through the entire thing, it basically was like one long ramble. It was skipping over every other word.
Cooper, you remember
Republicans had some funny instances where they kind of heckled him a little bit, and I've never in my life have ever had seen a president give a speech and then literally backtrack exactly what he just said in the speech, where he talked about saying that Republicans want to cut entitlement programs, right? Which then all the Republicans then shouted, "No, we don't want to cut entitlement programs." And then he's like, "Oh, I guess we're all good then here." we knew that was a clear staple of will be his campaign, because in Wisconsin the next day or the next day after, he gave that same speech and the same thing and said Republicans want to cut entitlements.
You know it's ridiculous how the mainstream media portrayed him as. They were saying, as the Republicans made defiant remarks, they're like, we've never seen a member of Congress do something like this in a State of Union address. So shows a complete Republicans are not willing to negotiate. I mean, how ridiculous is that? But yeah, you remember we made a bet, Cooper? Remember I would say I took the over on Biden mumbling at least 10 times during the State of the Union.
That was an easy one. You didn't deserve. There was no. You had the favorite and stuff like that. But I did win the fact that he wore a blue tie, though, so we can call it even.
How about the one where he went off script? I don't know. He went off script quite a bit of times.
He did go off script a couple times.
Yeah, I mean,
one of the hilarious things that, again, because he didn't talk about China or any sort of foreign policy relations at all, we didn't really get to talk about the gigantic spy balloon that flew across the entirety of the country for 8 days.
Oh, God.
And then Joe Biden then talked about the fact that that we are like a strong force, that we have to preserve American sovereignty. And yet, like 2 days ago, there was a spy balloon flying over that flew across every single major military base in the entire country, from Montana to South Carolina. Literally the entire length of the country.
It took 8 days to do that as well. I mean,
oh my goodness gracious!
You see a balloon, shows Chinese superior technology with a fucking over the country.
They got a hot air balloon, yeah, of course.
We're going back to World War I. Oh Jesus Christ! But yeah, I mean, it kind of shows you what we're willing to do with China. I mean, he's backpedaling. I don't know. Like we were talking about it. Does this show kind of like? Does he have no spine, Joe Biden, or does it show maybe China? Joe Biden has a little influence in terms of China, maybe some deals going on.
I mean, I'd attribute the spineless cowardiceness myself, but based on everything that happened during that time, you can only make two assumptions, right? Either he did it because he was he was just a coward to do so and didn't have the spine to stand up to China, even in the tiniest degree possible. Or you could say that because of dealings he's had with possibly Hunter Biden, that he's kind of in the pocket of China. Therefore, he wants to give them as much freedom and access to doing whatever they want. Both of those are, I mean, likely outcomes. I like to attribute a little bit more to the stupidity because we all know he's really stupid. So
Right. I mean, we can't think.
Can't think at all.
He's thinking about smelling young kids' hairs, not actually policy.
That's what goes around his head 24 hours a day.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. Something else. Oh shoot. Yeah, I think in terms of China, I mean, we see him saying, "Oh, we have to stop China," but then he tries to deflect it and say Donald Trump did this in his administration. He saw balloons. I mean, like everything's.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Another fantastic fabrication by the media where there's because they said that this occurred under Donald Trump's administration several times. So you don't need to worry about you don't have to talk about Biden's ineptitude in this situation because it happened under Trump, except it was basically a total fabrication where everyone in the Trump administration was like, this never happened. Anyone in his top brass was like, nope, this wasn't the case. Then they tried to make it say that that it just happened really fast and that like it didn't even have time to reach Trump's office, and it's just like no substantial evidence to anything back it up. Anyone that made those claims were done anonymously, so it's like how realistic can you take those responses? So it basically leaves the line at neutral, and all we know for certain is that Biden did a terrible job.
I mean, no, that's absolutely true. And you keep talking about the balloon situation, and we don't talk about TikTok. I mean, it is a Chinese industry, and it has influence over Americans. I mean, I probably say I think it's the #1 app in the App Store, and all these young kids posting all this content, private information. I mean, they can easily retract that. Why? Who cares about a balloon? You're having information on individual citizens of the United States. And look, we're not banning it. We're not even thinking about banning it.
I hope it's not the #1 app store in the in the App Store. That'd be awful to think about. That's so popular. I don't want to think about that. That's awful.
I know, but we got to talk about it because it's like, well, we can't let. I mean, there has to be some change in this. Why do they keep doing this? Why are they not actually changing it? That's what.
Yeah, and that's another thing that Biden said, that he was not interested in banning TikTok. I mean, if we care so much about the balloon, which is a big deal, right? We should be annoyed, at least annoyed by it. Right. Then more emphasis should be put on TikTok, the literal Chinese spy social media app. So,
absolutely. I mean, as we also see that taking place, it's the congressional hearings for the Twitter files. I don't know if you caught that a little bit, Cooper, but it's some interesting stories and speculations on that matter.
I mean, it's nothing that I don't think that we kind of had already suspected in the past. Like we knew that there was who's that individual that was having meetings with the FBI. We learned about this because his email lists were being leaked, saying to FBI officials saying they're like, I'm ready for the meeting and stuff like that, and him bragging about it, I think on his social media.
I forgot the main suspect and the main interviewee, right? During the
it was him, and then Vijaya Gotti, I remember is the first day that I saw mostly.
Right.
But
give me 1 second.
Yeah, so it was, and this individual, if I remember correctly, is like a super creep and has several Twitter accounts where he posted like weird, creepy child related imagery or like messages and stuff like that, kind of very pedophilic in its nature. If I remember, this is the same guy.
Right. You're true, but it's kind of showing, and we see kind of Democrats in the congressional hearings trying to backpedal on the fact that, well, these things are actually becoming true. Like we see Jeremy Raskin, the guy, I don't know what he was doing. He was wearing some weird bandana hat. He's part of Democrats. And he was saying, well, Twitter as a private entity are able to, say whatever they want or ban whoever they want under their own, if it's under their own private company, they're able to do that. But, I mean, as we know, there's government influence within the Twitter files. So, and they try to, what he tried to do is try to diffuse it and blame the January 6th writers, and that the Twitter didn't do anything with that. So, which is completely wrong thing to say, as we see evidence coming out basis on that. I mean, not only that, we talked. Remember, one of the congressmen was talking about how Donald Trump and Marjorie Greene were kicked out of Twitter, right? Mm-hmm. He was talking about how the Ayatollah of Iran, who is preaching hate against Israel and America itself, is not banned by Twitter. And wouldn't they be against their own Twitter's own private disinformation
terms of service? Yeah, it's
service. Yeah,
it's just this ridiculous. It's the double standards. We talk about this all the time, right? We talk about the double standard the media gives. Talk about the double standard that social media gives. It's just again and again and again, they'll say something and then they just do the opposite, right? And then they implement some of their criteria for some people and some for others. So an individual that is literally advocating for like the death and harm of Jewish people, right, they say on their platform, we don't really care about that. But if you post anything about a true story like the Hunter Biden laptop during an election year, then that's got to suppress that.
Right. I mean,
at a time too, by the way, that the FBI knew that it was true. They knew it was a true story at the time.
Yeah, I mean, there's documents. I forgot what his name was. Chang. He had documents talking about Russian disinformation leaks on Twitter, right? Mm-hmm. We're saying not explicitly about the Hunter Biden laptop, but there's stories that come that were Russian disinformation that would harm the country, and that the Twitter believed it and suppressed these stories from coming out, and that's what kind of took place. But as we know, obviously, of now what we know about the Hunter Biden laptop story, that's obviously not true. Now, whatever you see, any democratic standpoint in the situation, them trying to backpedal the fact about that and talking about that, we definitely see this government collusion in one way or another, them listening to the government and influence from lobbyist groups that influencing over Twitter, that this is not necessarily about a private company doing their own dealings, that they have some influence from government, whether we like to believe it or not. And the problem I have, with people going against it, Jamie Rapskin, I mean, we could talk more about this, maybe more of a conspiracy, but it's really not. His dealings, his wife was actually in the Federal Reserve Board. If you don't know the Federal Reserve Board, they have dealings with private corporations, and they bailed out private corporations during 2008 recession. So we see maybe this kind of big tech collusion with him, maybe with his family, and perhaps that. So, I mean, we can't not draw into conclusion these are maybe the focal points of certain congressmen within the Twitter files in the congressional hearings. But, I just like to point out that it is important that, even though symbolic importance, I don't know if you agree with me about this, Cooper, but it's kind of symbolically important that we're having these Twitter file congressional hearings. I know there probably won't come out of anything to do with it, but at least we're having these talks, and, we're not talking about like Twitter doing nothing.
I mean, that is the saddest truth about these, is that generally this is not the first time Congress has had, media company personalities and stuff like that. They had Jack Dorsey. They had, who's the guy? Who's the lizard guy? Mark Zuckerberg, right. So they've had these guys in front of Congress before, and they've ringed them out, so to speak. And then we just don't really see changes, which is the saddest things. Nobody gets indicted. Nobody gets in trouble for anything. So, but it is good to emphasize kind of and bringing to light some of the things that have been going on. Some things that the Twitter files have one of the very mass amounts of pieces of information that they've brought to light that have been kind of remarkable to see and to witness going on. Just how much collusion's basically been occurring,
right?
And how much they skirt around the terms to make sure it's not like the federal government directly saying that, oh, this story in particular, you have to censor that, but just like broad stroke and saying all this in like very heavily implying that these things are Russian disinformation, and therefore you have to censor them.
Oh, just going ahead, I found the guy who we're talking about. Yael Roth was the main conspirator of the government.
Thank you.
But yeah, I just want to talk about maybe like what we're talking about, they might not have something come out about with this, maybe prosecutions, but maybe what can come out of it in the next couple of weeks that people are going to start talking about it, right? That perhaps, you can't hide these facts from taking place in terms of the American public understanding and acknowledging it, right? At least that's what I'm hoping now will come out of it. That not nothing will come out of it. That will speak more about it, and there can't be a denial from constituents in the Democratic Party and the FBI and DOJ or in Twitter, right? That evidence will present itself, and that big tech can't anymore under that falsified.
You have way more hope in that situation than I do, because like even during this time of these trials, it's so apparent that even the basic amount of Google searching can totally refute what some of these people are saying. AOC was talking to an individual, I can't remember who it was, from Twitter, one of the former employees, and was using libs of TikTok as an example. Libs of TikTok, right, as an example of a individual that they were banning and then allowing back on the platform and stuff like that. And AOC basically just said that this person has been spreading disinformation, even though literally the site is just republishing like leftist TikToks, basically. Not even basically, that's what it is actually. Saying that this person perpetuated lies about a hospital, that they were performing hysterectomies on minors, even though, again, you could go to their website and they advocated for hysterectomies for 16-year-olds, which last time I checked was a minor. And then saying that, oh, there was that all this created a bunch of hate towards that hospital and it resulted in bomb threats, even though, again, no bomb threats were ever able to be presented as evidence. The individual in charge of Libs of TikTok offered a $10,000 reward to anybody that could prove that someone had committed a bomb threat against this hospital, because we don't like bomb threats. So we don't like people doing that. So, but nobody offered to have information about that. So and this is someone who is considered an elite, right? Someone who is in charge of, who is seen as a political figure, AOC, and it's just a total, just like lying sack of garbage.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh wait, God, I forgot. I remember her talking about AOC. I'm talking specifically. She was like making some big stink after Tlaib got kicked out of the Foreign Affairs Committee.
Mm-hmm.
How dare you get a woman of color out of the Foreign Affairs Committee? I'm like, was it really about that? I mean, you would do the same thing if it went against your policy decision. So I mean, just the hypocrisy of
her getting up. She's the greatest actor, getting up and stomping her feet, slamming her notebook on the counter and being like, this is an outrage. And just like, dude, happens all the time. Your party's the one who started it, by the way. If you ever want to know how smart these individuals in politics really are, just know that AOC is in office and she was a bartender beforehand and just like immediately became a politician and is now one of the most famous politicians on the Democratic side. So if you know that's the people they prop up, I mean, have a little faith in your own intelligence, anybody, please.
How about Joe Biden? Did he even do anything before becoming a politician? I know we're talking about
Democrats. He's been in politics. I mean, if you haven't been noticed, I've been increasing the age he's been in politics. He's been in politics for over 250 years. All right. It's been since his 20s that he's been in office. Did you know he had a single job?
Yeah. Did you know he was the actual student of Karl Marx? He's that old. But yeah, it's just ridiculous. Yeah, it's just ridiculous when we see who we're propping up in the Democratic Party. And like, if we're gonna get, I think it's time to find final arguments. But if we're talking about Joe Biden as a whole and his presidency, I mean, it's an absolute joke. There's no partisancy at all. It's all appealing to the woke agenda narrative, right? All the policies are appealing to that, blaming Republicans for everything, or claiming them for entitlement programs or police reform or whatever it's taking place. They're blaming for that and just contriving this narrative against January 6th insurrectionists. They're not getting past all these different things, and they're trying to backpedal on certain things when certain things come to light about the Twitter files. I mean, I don't know about you, Cooper, but there's no progress, whatever. Everyone's digressing and going more and more into a little hut or circle where they came from. I'm talking mainly about the Democratic Party, at least in this circumstance. But it seems like there's no way of building partisanship, whatever, right?
Yeah, it's hilarious. If this was the fourth year of Joe Biden's presidency, we'd be like, oh man, that's been this was a crazy 4 years, right? But we're only in year two. And we got a whole another 2 more years of suffering that we got to deal with.
Right.
So hopefully we can make it out intact with a couple smiles and a couple laughs along the way.
Yeah, we still got at least a year left of Joe Biden's presidency, right? Right.
More than that.
A little more than a year, yeah. So let's hope we United States is still intact by then. We can elect a more competent president. Well, it was good talking to you, Cooper. Always is. I think we had a good conversation. I think we'll have more about the Twitter files, more to come.